Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have such an exciting group with us. So welcome to the AI Revolution, where we're joined by three incredible leaders at the forefront of public sector AI transformation, from state innovation to national finance and security. Today, we'll explore how real-world AI is shaping how governments serve people and how public and private sectors can work together responsibly and effectively. To my left, we have Tarun Chhabra, Head of National Security at Anthropic, Paris Malik, Chief AI Officer at U.S. Treasury, and Amanda Crawford, Texas' Chief Information Officer. So we're going to get right into it with Paris. Let's start with the big picture. How do you see AI transforming public services today, and what inspired you to lead in this space?
Well, fundamentally, I think AI is really going to transform how government creates value. It's going to make services and operations more effective, and teams will be empowered to do things faster. I was drawn to the role to help shape the AI transformation. I've spent majority of my career at this intersection between strategy and execution. I think that AI is probably one of the most powerful levers we have to modernize the government, and that's a very exciting place to be.
This idea of government creating value, I'm going to go to you now, Amanda. From your vantage point in Texas, how is the state thinking about AI as part of a broader digital transformation agenda? And when and where do you see the greatest opportunities kind of aligning with this, creating value?
So I think, what we've really seen, and we just wrapped last week our biennial legislative session, and there was, tremendous amount of talk around AI and how it can really be that change agent. And it is absolutely a key part of what state leadership in Texas sees as a way that we can move forward and really reimagine how government is delivering for our residents. And so one piece of legislation that passed, it was our House Bill 2018 that created an artificial intelligence division within my agency and provided one of those unique things in state legislatures, both people and money as well, to actually be able to do the thing. And a key part of this division that's actually written into code is on legacy modernization and working with agencies, so our agency being sort of that AI Sherpa, and expanding on the roles that we've done more informally with our agencies, to really go ahead and advance the ball. Talking about opportunities and value, I think at the end of the day, it's about efficiency. It's about doing more with less. Our population in Texas is growing dramatically. I think we'll be at 31 million people now. If we, probably by the time I finish the sentence, it'll be above that. And so trying to meet the needs of those Texans where they are, but also being good fiscal stewards, is where we see AI really being able to come in and advance the ball for those folks.
You mentioned the importance of AI, having an AI division within your agency and AI serving as this change agent. Going to you, Tarun. You've seen both sides from government and industry. What's the ideal model of how you see these sectors collaborating to assure AI is safe and aligned in development, especially in high-risk domains?
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. Well, obviously it has to be a partnership, but what's been so striking about this revolution is that so much of the innovation in AI has come from outside of the government. And so it's really required a close partnership between the frontier AI labs, hyperscalers like AWS working with the government and advising, just as you were talking about earlier this morning, on all the potential transformations that are really at hand, which are really hard to get our minds around. I mean, when we struggle for analogies, and we're probably going to continue to struggle for them, but when we think about the ways in which AI will transform our intelligence operations, transform defense as well, we're already beginning to see it now. And so I think one of the things that we tried to do was, in the previous administration, was actually push accelerated pilots to ensure, to the point made earlier this morning, you're getting it in the hands of the users. That's really the only way to get it going. But then I think the next stage is for us to basically look at what are some big national security problems, what are some areas where we are lagging vis-a-vis our adversaries, where AI could actually contribute to significant uplift, and then really join forces to try to solve those problems.
And you speak about hyperscalers like AWS and the importance of public-private partnerships. From your national security lens, what are the stakes for responsible AI in high-risk or mission-critical environments?
Yeah. So this is an area where you really can't in any way overstate the importance of partnership. We already have in the US government really strong governance practices when it comes to delivering and using certain kinds of capabilities. We have to marry those then with the new capabilities coming on with AI, and there's really no answer but to iterate together on them. And so that's where the government will iterate on what do responsible frameworks look like to deploy some of these systems, and that's going to have to be in tandem and in partnership with the frontier developers.
And I want to ask the same question about Paris and Amanda. Where have you seen successful partnerships between the government and industry accelerate innovation, and what do you both individually feel made that work?
I would maybe offer that where I've seen this work the best, it's when it's not really about technology, but it's about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think when government and the private sector are very clear on the outcomes and how they're going to measure success towards those outcomes with the right guardrails, you have huge impact. I think that this clarity of purpose, right, creates trust, and then innovation really stems from that.
I think when we talk about collaboration, and the whole key to this is it is partnership, and it's not just partnership and giving lip service to it, but it's really private and public sectors working side by side. So our model in Texas for state technology is highly federated, but it also relies tremendously on the private sector partnerships. So my agency is now probably, it's a little bit less than 350 people, but we run about $7 billion worth of sales and services through our agency and deliver for all of our state agencies and Texans by doing that with partnerships. We are a highly, CIO is a broker type model where we work on partnerships with companies like AWS, like many of the other folks that are in this room. And the key to that is they have to be tied in on the mission. And it's the mission of the public sector. It's that mission of service. And so, we say you leave your badge at the door and you're going to come in and you're going to sit around the table. And it's folks who in other circumstances would be competitors. But when they're working together and we're all trying, again, to solve the problem, what is the problem? What are we trying to do? Everybody comes together to serve that greater good.
I like what both of you said, Paris, clarity of purpose, and then Amanda saying that even as competitors, everyone can come together to serve the public good. Earn trust is one of our essential leadership principles here at Amazon, and we know how essential public trust is. This is for all of you, how are all of your teams approaching responsible AI development, especially when it comes to transparency, fairness, and explainability? Do you want to start? I can go reverse this time.
Sure, happy to start. So, for us, a key part of it, obviously, I think, particularly in government, the transparency is key when it comes to anything, whether it's AI, whatever the next technology is going to be, or just how it is we do our daily operations. And so, part of that also comes from an education standpoint. One of the things we've been doing in Texas is we started it, I guess, a couple years ago, is we created an AI user group for public sector employees, and it's whether it's at the state level or the local level. And we now have over 700 public sector members who are a part of that group. And they come together for informal meetings, and they exchange policies, best practices, use case, and more importantly, it's having the conversations around that ethical deployment, why it's important. We have speakers come in to visit with those folks, but it's constantly having that conversation and the education around it, so we're not just plunging headfirst into something without really thinking about what its impacts may be.
I love what you said, and I think what's so interesting about AI, it really starts with values, and those values need to be cascaded throughout the organization. And so what does that mean? That means establishing what are your AI principles around fairness and transparency, making sure that that gets incorporated into the organization's strategy. But you can't stop there, because otherwise you just have a strategy that sort of sits on a shelf and nobody really adheres to it. It's about building in the operational discipline, so thinking through and making sure that your teams understand what the guardrails are around testing, deployment, and monitoring of those systems, because trust and transparency can't be done at the end. It can't be retrofitted. It needs to be done from the start at the beginning of model development.
So this is really baked into the DNA at Anthropic. I mean, to Paris's point about operationalizing this, there's kind of a constitution, which is kind of used for alignment generally. We're transparent about it, so you know what you're getting when that alignment happens. Second, we have a Frontier Red team that is evaluating and testing for risks. Third, we have a really strong commitment to transparency. You'll see the last model card we did from Claude 4 is 160 pages of all of the evals and testing and potential risks. So we try to be as transparent really as possible there. I think it really is kind of has to be instilled from the top, kind of as a leadership value, especially right now. And then finally on societal impacts, one of the things we're looking at now is working with a bunch of economists around the country to look at the impacts on particular job sectors and how that could evolve in tandem with our technologists, because there are just frankly a lot of questions we still don't know the answer to, but we think there's a responsibility on the part of frontier companies to help figure that out.
It's so refreshing to see how both public and private partnerships are accelerating these advancements, and also how you all are thinking about this so holistically. From one of the leaders at Amazon always talks about built-in and not bolted-on initiatives, and so trust being one of those, and then you're also looking at workforce and how AI will impact like almost every stack of this ecosystem, and it's just really refreshing to see how thoughtful everyone's being on this. I'm going to go back to you, Tarun. How do you ensure that AI systems used for national security remain aligned with democratic values and civil liberties, especially as their capabilities grow?
Yeah. So this is something that on the government side, I think we, in the course of developing a national security memorandum on AI, really focused on in consultation and with all of the relevant national security agencies. And then, inside the company, I think we all have user policies that try to reflect those values as well. But I think at the end of the day, if we say that it's really critical that the United States and our democratic allies win the AI competition, particularly when it comes to China, it's really crucial that we step up to support national security, and we do it in a way that's totally values aligned. I think one of the areas where I think we really need to do more thinking generally is applications of domestic surveillance, right? That's where we have current protocols in place, which certain authorities and certain and certain technology capabilities, but as the latter really evolve and accelerate, then we have to make sure we remain in balance, because ultimately it is about defense of our core values.
Would you consider domestic surveillance one of the under-discussed AI risks in public sector that public sector leaders here should be thinking about more seriously?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we've probably had already some good discussion about cybersecurity as well, but I think both of those are topics and areas where I think we need a lot more attention.
And Paris, what does it take to operationalize AI in large organizations?
Well, I think it really starts with leadership, and it ends with systems. And I think, Tarun, you talked a little bit about this, the leadership buy-in at the top of the house, and then creating that tone from the top that permeates throughout the organization. I think what differentiates those that start the journey versus those that then create sustainable impact is then coupling that strategy with the operational discipline around management routines. So what does a rollout strategy look like? Is that clearly communicated in the organization? What are the policies and standards? Do people understand that? And I think one of the most crucial aspects is, as we deploy these systems and these new technologies, do people have the right training? And will they adopt the technology in a rapid fashion? So it goes back to strategy, people, process, and of course the underlying technology. I think without all of those elements working in tandem, it becomes very difficult to scale effectively.
And Amanda, asking you the same question, do you see that similarly as you're leading at the state level?
I do. I mean, I think that, again, agreeing with Paris, it's about buy-in from the top, and it's about leadership. And I think one of the there are many wonderful things about the technology and the conversations we're having. We're having great conversations around how to clean up data, which is a great and long overdue conversation. We're talking about how we can create efficiencies with really leveraging this technology. And so we're having more conversations with actually agency leaders and business heads around, they're asking questions about AI, which is terrific because, again, you need that buy-in from the top to be able to go out and advocate for whether it's the funding, whether it's really looking at the systems that we have and where can we put it where it's going to provide the most value. And so, again, going back to the education piece and the conversation, I think that's what's really going to drive it.
So coming to you still, Amanda, the Texas legislature created an AI council that you took part in ahead of the 2025 legislative session. What did the council discuss, and what were your key takeaways that you'd like to share here?
So the AI Council was chaired by a member of our House of Representatives, a member of the Senate. I was on the committee, and then there were folks that were appointed by the governor from various disciplines across both government and the private sector, and really looked at the technology. We held hearings, and we had state agencies, we had local governments, we had higher ed, we had the private sector come to us, talk about the use cases, talk about what they were using AI for. Some of our agencies came and said, we're not using it, and we're going to wait, and we're just going to wait and see. The saying in government, no one wants to be first and no one wants to be last, is also, that's very true. And then there were others who were diving absolutely head first on this technology. So the conversations were really informative, and what we really saw, and it was something we were talking about a little bit backstage, is some of these agencies are really going all out, and they're going headfirst into this. So now what we came away from as a council is how can we create efficiencies with that? If we're looking at this as an efficiency creator, as a way to, again, save money, rather than having multiple systems that do the same thing across the state agencies, how can we consolidate? How can we be smarter around the rolling out and the implementation? And then, of course, there were conversations that I think led to some of the legislation that we had around creating an AI code of ethics. And making sure that there were responsible guardrails for how that was deployed in the public sector. But again, great conversations, but also I think it exposed what we saw within the constituency at large in Texas, is that there's still a lot of concern from our residents about how it's going to be used, and again, on whether it's a surveillance tool and different things like that, that we as government need to be able to answer.
That's really interesting. So backstage, Paris and I were speaking about how essentially there's two types of people, right? Those who leverage AI and those who have yet to. And a lot of that apprehension and fear sometimes comes from just not having access to the technology, or not also understanding that you're probably already using that technology. Right. And so it's so important in all of our roles to assure that we're increasing education about the technology, how it can benefit people in their everyday lives, and how it's not simply a surveillance tool or taking jobs away, like kind of taking that apprehension out of it so that we can adopt it to continue this global leadership that we're all striving for the US to have. I'm going to have this question now for all of you. If you were mentoring a public sector leader just starting in their AI journey, what's one piece of advice you'd give them? I'll start with Paris and then go around.
I think what I would say is that the AI journey, one could think of it mostly as a cultural change program, not just a technical change program. I would say that don't wait till things are perfect. Start pilots, see what works, experiment with the right guardrails, and then you can really think through how you move from those pilots to sustainable change.
Turin, and then I'll go.
I think you have to manage a dilemma, which is on the one hand, you need to adopt and start experimenting as quickly as possible. And that means you're using it in the context of your existing architecture and bureaucracy. But on the other hand, you have to really step back and think, what is my core mission? What am I trying to achieve every day? And with these tools, am I structured the right way to do this? And so that's where we're all heading, I think, is kind of reconceptualizing the way that we organize our work, the way that we organize our teams in light of the new tools. But at the same time, you just got to keep moving and adopting, and you have to manage that dilemma.
So it's not just we were talking about earlier, a cultural change, right? Like coming from the top and making sure that we have this deeper understanding of how we can leverage it. But then it's also like a transformational like change within an organization, within sectors, within leaders within leaders, in order to carry that through? Is that something that you guys are adopting at Anthropic?
Yeah, that's the advice certainly that we provide
Yeah.
to our adopters, and that's something I saw in government as well, which is a big push to adopt, iterate, learn to use it. But then on the other hand, is the way that you're structured to handle mission A, B, and C really the best way now that you have these tools?
I think it would be, I agree with both of what they said. So understanding and managing expectations around it as well. And I think part of that is understanding the framework that you operate in. So there was a little bit of this discussion in the previous panel, certainly around data collection and privacy and how that data is used. And in government, it is a little bit different. We have public records laws, we have records retention laws, we have a lot of things that, particularly around data usage, that can be a little bit more challenging for us, and that could, before we just need to truly understand that framework that is within the public sector, so that when we're rolling out technology, that it's not just sort of that shiny object syndrome and it's really exciting and new, but we understand what it is that we're deploying into our environments and making sure that we can handle that within the regulatory framework that we operate in.
Going a little deeper into that, making sure that there's an understanding on what we're deploying and in some cases what we're legislating.
Correct.
So if we can kind of go into like, how do you feel like leaders should really educate themselves on AI, dependent on what sector that they're in?
Well, it is kind of interesting because there's certainly a lot of information out there, not all of it good, about what could be used. And one of the things that I'm excited about that came out of the last session, our legislative session, is the creation of an AI literacy program that we have in Texas. So the focus being not just on public sector employees, making sure they understand it both from a technician point of view, but also just a user and a consumer. But then taking that again and rolling it out to the population at large, so that we can really have that goes to transparency, that goes to building trust, is when consumers understand what it is, whether it's a government consumer or just a customer consumer that is using these technologies. So I think that's important. I know that's the thing that AWS is working on as well around AI literacy. So I'm excited to see how that rolls out.
In closing, I'm going to ask you all, start with Tarun, what are you most excited for about the AI revolution?
I'm most excited to deploy the technology to help leapfrog in areas where we've fallen behind in national security. I think there's enormous potential when it comes to our defense industrial base and particular government programs to deploy AI and see strategic dividends that without AI just would have been totally impossible.
I'm most excited to see how AI is going to modernize government and drive mission impact across these agencies.
Ditto on that one. But I'm also, we have, for so long, there have been so many challenges that we've been faced with. And when you're looking, again, at budget constraints and not been able to tackle some of these, the possibility of what we can do with this technology, again, to really reimagine how we're doing things, and also just some of the basics. Like, real quick story on a use case that we're doing right now with our Secretary of State's office in Texas is, imagine, if you will, y'all have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's kind of like, at the end where the Ark of the Covenant, and they go down, and it's a room, and it's all the boxes in the warehouse. We have something kind of like that, and it's filled with paper. And I know everybody has something like that somewhere in the bowels of government. Using AI to be able to go in and go through, and we're not just scanning and digitizing, like, okay, that's fine. And we're talking about tens of millions of documents, but actually being able to use that technology to intelligently comprehend what it is and to put it into a usable format was something that would have taken people countless hours and way too much time, and probably never would have been invested in. And so when you look at the possibility to do things where we can actually tackle some of those to-dos that have been sitting in our giant warehouses for a while, that's a game changer, and it's a totally different way on how we can be able to serve and really do, again, what government is supposed to do, which is to be able to provide customer service and service to the people in our states.
Well, what makes me so excited is that we have such great leaders in government right now working on these issues with the two of you, and then having your expertise with such a great partner is also something that I'm so hopeful for. I hope you guys enjoyed our session today. Thank you all for your time, and thank you three for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.